I mean, you can eat pizza or burgers with your hands, and there's nothing wrong with that. Hi, welcome back to Background Voice with me, your host Elle, and this is the channel where I basically just do research on random topics I find interesting. Most of them are based on South Asian culture, things I found out, and also sometimes social issues that I'm just really interested in or have been affected by. So if that's something that interests you, please subscribe and like this video because that's going to encourage me to make them more often. Anyway, now that that is all out of the way, let's go on to today's topic. So have you ever wondered why South Asians eat with their hands? I mean, it's not something that I've ever wondered because it's just something that I'm used to. I then saw this video of Selena Gomez being taught how to eat with her hands on her cooking show. I haven't actually watched it. It was just a clip that was going around.
Put your utensils down. We're going to eat with our hands like we do in India.
Oh, wow. Okay. Amazing.
Like this.
A lot of the time, people tend to paint the idea of eating with your hands as something that's very uncivilized. And I don't really understand why the way we eat has to be categorized as either civilized or uncivilized. But hey, that's the world we live in, so I guess I'm just going to have to deal with that. Of course, there are techniques to make sure that you don't make a mess everywhere. It's just something that I'm very used to. It's not something that I've had to think about in a lot of detail. In my personal opinion, eating with your hands does tend to make the eating experience a lot more enjoyable. I feel like the food just tastes better, and a lot of the food that we do have is just a lot easier to eat with your hands. But that's not the only reason that South Asians tend to eat with their hands. In some South Asian cultures, eating with your hands is considered a lot more hygienic, and also it means that the individual can actually feel the texture and the temperature of the food just before they start to eat it. Being able to touch your food and feel the texture means that you can also identify if there are any foreign objects or impurities that are hidden away in your meal. I don't really know who's hiding foreign objects in anyone's plate of food, but hey, you never know. Also, a lot of South Asian cultures do tend to sit on the floor when they eat, so it's a lot easier to eat with your hands when you're in that seated position on the floor, as opposed to trying to find the right position in order to use a knife and fork. Eating with your hands is also thought to promote more mindful eating. When you pick up the food to eat it, you're adding that additional sensory experience, the touch element. So now you're combining taste, smell, touch, and this does tend to help improve the experience when you're eating. Just like majority of the topics I've talked about so far on this channel, the reason why we tend to eat with our hands is linked back to Ayurvedic practices. Ayurveda is a form of medicine that tries to maintain a balance between the mind, the body, and the environment. The concept of doshas play a central role in Ayurveda. Doshas are the three fundamental energies or biological forces that govern the functioning of our bodies and mind. These three doshas are Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, and each dosha is associated with specific qualities and functions in the body. Vata is associated with the elements of air and space, and it governs the movement, creativity, and nervous system functions. When Vata is in balance, a person is energetic, creative, and they tend to have a healthy bodily movement. So when you eat with your hands, it's believed to stimulate the nerve endings on your fingertip, and this helps balance the Vata dosha. Pitta is associated with the elements of fire and water. It governs digestion, metabolism, and transformation processes in the body. A balanced Pitta results in a strong digestive fire and efficient metabolism. So when you eat with your hands, it's thought to enhance the connection between you and the food, which is supposedly meant to help with the digestive process from the very beginning, because you're more likely to, as nasty as it sounds, salivate. That obviously helps with the breakdown of the food right at the beginning. And so this connection is believed to help with the Pitta dosha. Kapha is associated with the elements of earth and water. It governs stability and structure and lubrication in the body. Balanced Kapha provides strength, stability, and immunity. And as a lot of the food comes from the land, from the earth, by creating that connection with the food through your fingertips first, helps balance the Kapha dosha. Also, another thing that's believed within Ayurveda is that each finger on your hand is associated with one of the 5 elements. When you eat with your hands, you're connecting these elements and you're creating balance between all of them. The thumb is the extension of space, Akash. The forefinger is an extension of air, Vayu. The middle finger is an extension of fire, Teja. The ring finger is an extension of water, Jala. And the little finger is an extension of earth, Prithvi. So the actual process of eating with your hands, that gesture is thought to balance the energies in our body. And because of this, it's also considered a lot more respectful to eat your food with your hands because you're connecting that physical element with that spiritual element as well. So yeah, that's the little Ayurvedic history and Ayurvedic understanding behind eating with our hands. So we've spoken a lot about the spiritual aspects and the Ayurvedic history behind eating with our hands. But one thing we should also consider, like with pretty much every single one of my videos, is the role that colonization has had in these practices and how it's changed the course of history as well. And a large reason why we should be considering this is because of the civilized and uncivilized debate, I guess, behind these very normal cultural practices. In Western culture, it's considered a taboo and impolite to eat with your hands. Colonizers often viewed their own culture and cultural practices as superior to those of the colonized people. And this has led to devaluation of native customs and traditions, one of which is eating with our hands. And colonizers imposed their own norms and values and considered them as more civilized and proper. With colonization came the imposition of European customs and etiquette. That included the use of utensils for eating. And so, because of this, colonizers enforced their practices in various ways and often portrayed local practices as primitive or backwards. There was a social hierarchy that was established, and it placed European culture at the top and native cultures below it. So, adopting to European customs, such as using utensils, was often seen as a way to climb the social ladder and align themselves with the colonizers' standards of civilization. Also, unsurprisingly, with everything I've talked about in terms of Ayurveda and spirituality, religion does have a role to play in this change. Many indigenous rituals and practices were involved with eating with your hands. But as Christianity was being pushed as the main religion by Europeans, these practices were discouraged and the idea was reinforced that native practices were inferior. It shouldn't be forgotten that European colonizers also controlled the education systems and media outlets, so they were able to shape public perceptions of these native people and their practices. They would often portray native practices in a very demeaning way in order to contribute to the stigmatization. Colonization also resulted in the erasure of many aspects of indigenous cultures, including food-related practices. This erasure often meant that younger generations grew up without having a strong connection to their cultural heritage and traditions. It's also important to note that the impact of colonization varied from region to region, and it depended on the specific colonial power that was involved. Many post-colonial societies have been engaged in efforts to reclaim and celebrate their cultural heritage as well. So, I mean, we're moving in the right direction, I guess. I think there's been a major increase in people's understanding and acceptance on different practices, different cultures, and the way they do things as the norm. A big reason for this is our access to a diverse range of cultures, foods, people. Of course, perceptions can improve, but I don't think we're at a point where people are seeing it as completely uncivilized. I mean, you can eat pizza or burgers with your hands and there's nothing wrong with that. So I don't see why it should be any different if people of various cultures want to eat their traditional foods the traditional way. But that's all that's on my mind. What do you think?